Hello, and welcome to the Scientific Adventures of Beardman. Today we're going to be looking at charging by induction, which is a concept builder on physicsclassroom.com. The topic for this is static electricity. That's kind of like the unit. This concept builder builds heavily upon polarization. So if you have not seen polarization, I'll recommend that. I am going to briefly review the two slides we looked at in polarization. First one reminded us that this was something we talked about in chemistry last year, where the oxygen is more electronegative, so it draws the electrons closer to it, making this side of the atom slightly negatively charged and this side positively charged. The same idea is present now when we take an object, typically a conductor, and we bring a charge near it. We know that the electrons, which are negative, will be repelled from these other negative electrons, and so they're going to be pushed to the far side of this bar, leaving a positive end and a negative end. Okay, let's get into how we apply that today. So there are two steps here. The first is polarization, which is exactly like you saw in the polarization concept builder. And now we're going to go to a step of charging. Okay, and there are a couple ways we can do that. So we'll talk about those as we get to these two examples. So first, let's talk about the polarization step. The polarization step happens when we bring a charge near a neutral conductor. Okay, the electrons inside this, I think it's pi 10, are going to be in an electric field caused by this positive charge down here. And we know that electrons are negative and this is positive, and we know that opposites attract. So within this material here, the electrons are going to flow towards the bottom of it. Okay, so that's what you'll see is something like that, flowing towards the bottom. We talked before about how the electrons would line up on the bottom, leaving some unattached protons up here near the top. So then what happens when we touch it with our finger? That's the big new thing. So you touch it with your finger. What does that do? Well, from 2 videos ago, we talked about grounding. Okay, that was in the conductors and insulators concept builder. And so what happens when you touch it to ground? You're connected to the earth, to this huge reservoir in the earth of electrons that can be moved there or come from there. And so if the electrons are being pulled towards the bottom of this plate, towards this positive charge, well, then electrons are going to be pulled from the earth through your finger and into to the bottom of that pi 10. Okay, and so if the electrons are being pulled that way, then when you remove your finger, you have now cut off this object from the reservoir of the earth. And so now this object, which has just gained electrons, will have a negative charge. Okay, so afterwards, this will have a negative charge. Okay, once you've removed your finger. All right, the same thing can be done over here. Here we've just got a couple different substances. We've got a balloon and a sphere instead of a plate and a pi 10. And so we got a negative charge. Electrons are negative, so the electrons are going to be pushed away. Okay, if they have somewhere to go, they're touching this other conductor, then they'll flow all the way into that new conductor. And since the electrons have flowed out of A and into B, once we remove B, if we remove B before we get rid of this balloon, then B is going to leave with all those extra electrons. So B will be negatively charged, but because we took those electrons away from A will have a positive charge. Okay? Once again, the electrons flowed away from A and into B because they were being repelled by this negative charge. So they flowed away. That left this with more protons that weren't able to move. Their electrons flowed away from them, and so we had extra protons left over for a positive charge. I hope you enjoy the puzzle of thinking through how